Thank you for tuning in to Movie Geeks United. Actor Tom Skerritt has appeared in over 40 feature films, and many of those films rank among the most beloved of the past 50 years. Robert Altman's MASH, Hal Ashby's Harold and Maude, Ridley Scott's Alien, Tony Scott's Top Gun, Robert Redford's A River Runs Through It, and Herbert Ross's Steel Magnolias are just a few of the collaborations he's enjoyed over his long and storied career. In this conversation, which we conducted for our Movie Geek Yearbook series segment on MASH, we chatted with Mr. Skerritt about all this and more.
You know, looking over your resume and rewatching a lot of your films in the past week, I got to tell you, you worked with two of my all-time favorite directors, Robert Altman and Hal Ashby.
Yeah.
And I think of both of those men, and I think those are the two guys that we need making movies today.
God, you know, it's hard to say this stuff. It's really inexplicable, you know. It just the thing is that Alien and Bob was my mentor before, and he was just a TV director before he got MASH. So, man, I got all the best. He made the best fritters in the store, you know. He just had something, man. And he was just a TV director I met initially, and I thought, well, I want to write and direct, and this is a guy who's invited me to watch, and then he invites me to mentor with him. So over a period of years, that happens until he calls me up one day and says, I got hired to do a movie. Hooray! And that's the rest is history. But you know, it just and then to go through that process, which the studio hated that film, and they wrote it off before it was ever finished. They wanted to fire him and all that, and he's telling me all this stuff and all this approach to making unorthodox material based on who you are. And that's all I've seen. And Hal Ashby had that same thing before he was just, when I first started mentoring with him, he was just, it was after he did Landlord, his first movie. And then when he was preparing to do Harold and Maude, somewhere in the midst of all of this, and I was going from Hal Ashby to Bob Altman, pre and post-production. Take the risk of possibilities. That's what I learned from both these guys, because I know that the studios were not really thrilled with either one of them. You know, for whatever reason, they were just doing unorthodox stuff. I mean, when they had Harold and Maude, Hal couldn't think of what to shoot. He couldn't cover these two scenes that he had to do that day, and that's what he sent back. He just said some clown-like thing that happened during the day that they did a video on, and the studio was not happy with that. That was the dailies that they got, was him sitting there trying to figure out how to do it. The light was not good. The landscape really wasn't working without the sun, that kind of stuff that happened. Mm-hmm. So he didn't try to do anything. He just said, I just didn't have it today. And that, of course, you know how that works. But here he was with Harold and Maude in the end.
Yeah. When you were doing, I just want to ask about a couple of specific movies, starting with MASH real quick. Were you aware while you were doing that movie, not only that you were doing something different, because I'm thinking about the overlapping dialogue and the unusual structure and setting of the film, but also that you were doing something slightly dangerous?
Absolutely, both dangerous and that we had something really worthwhile, and I was only aware of that because of my experiences with Bob Altman. I mean, what he said, the way he did it, his moments when he would, you know, be a little rough and how he dealt with people and so on and so forth. All that reality, all that entity that he had in terms of who he was and how he approached it. So that was very much that was all I knew. I didn't have any other frame of reference but this guy. So when he started doing this stuff, it just somehow came to me, and I didn't know quite he was shooting. It certainly was an unorthodox approach to filmmaking, but I saw it really as his chess game. And I'm not a big chess player, but I know a good chess player when I see it. And this is one of those guys. I said, he's just making some moves that I can't explain either. 2 weeks before we finished the film, I said to him, we got something here that I can't explain, but it's something very, very special, Bob. And he said, yeah. And I said, I went on to say, I bet they're going to make a series of this in 2 years. And I said, for the life of me, I can't imagine what that would be, given what I knew that he would be turning out.
Yeah.
And sure enough, he asked me if I would do it, and I said, I'm so entrenched in what we're doing together here that I couldn't consider doing a series. So,
it's an approach to filmmaking that I adore, because I think today, as complicated as many of the studio movies are, you have to pre-plan so much, and you feel like you've made the movie before you've made the movie. But I remember an interview years ago with Altman, and they were asking him about his upcoming movie that he was about to shoot. And they said, what is it about? And he said, I don't know. I haven't made it yet. There's the spontaneity of discovering while you're doing it, but I just love.
Yeah, I think that's a lot of what I feel about what I do. Is I don't know. So how are you going to act it? A director might say that not those words exactly, but they're trying to get how I'm going to approach it. I say, well, I guess we'll find out. I have no idea most of the time, unless you're, doing somebody who actually existed. Then you have to do a little research. But otherwise, this business we're in is just taking the risk of possibilities, and not thinking about whether you're going to win or lose or be the best or the worst, but just simply the experience of doing it is really, in the end, what it's all about. It's what you learn from it. And that's what really, I think, what I learned most from Altman and from Ashby. They both had different personalities, different approaches, but they were going at it with, I don't know I have no idea how this is going to turn out. The studios hate to hear that.
Yeah. Were you aware of the studio kind of lurking in the background of MASH, or was that
Oh, absolutely. He talked about that with me. He was sharing everything. He was just one of the things about him, and Ashby is the same way, is he embraces everybody. The cast, they both embraced the cast and crew, and made them all feel engaged by asking them what they thought about something. What do you think? Is that too hot or is that too cold? And everybody in MASH felt totally engaged. And probably, I remember telling Donald and Elliot, I said, about 2 weeks before we finished, I said, we're never going to have another experience like this one. And they didn't really know what to make of that, because they saw it differently. They were a little bit more orthodox in their approach. And I couldn't explain what I meant by that, because you'd have to have spent time with Altman. Yeah.
But by the time you returned with him on something like Thieves Like Us, obviously MASH had been a success. He was a critical darling for some of the movies that he made up to that point. Was he the same Altman when he directed you again?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, he was. He just sort of, I don't remember how that came about. I think it was just soon after. I think he did, what was ever that thing with Bud Cort?
Brewster McCloud. And then he did McCabe and Mrs. Miller.
Oh, yes. I remember he wanted me to do something in the cave that was, because I didn't do it, they cut the part out of it. Some, oh, God, I forgot what that was. Some sort of a guy who's describing it as it goes along, describing the story. And one of these kind of silly moments. And I had another job, so I couldn't do it. But I couldn't really get enough of that guy. Altman, Ashby was the same way. These guys were just waking me up every day and saying, "Come on, let's hop on that train and throw some coal on the fire and get this thing moving." And I'd say, I would never ask what direction are we going in and how fast do we want to go. I just jump on the train and see what I got out of it. And I knew I would survive somehow with these guys. And I just felt it was all a gift, to tell you the truth. Just all the whole thing from me, my whole life I look at it. And then Ridley, an alien. Whoa. The same thing, because these other guys, Altman in particular, because I'd been with him for several years, that was all me looking at that and saying, here I am with this guy, Ridley, who I'd seen his work, The Duelist, prior to doing Alien, so I knew what his capabilities were. He's a painter, master painter, and Renaissance in terms of modern day filmmakers, and just to have those experiences, mentoring with him, following him around, him throwing me off little tidbits as a teacher, saying, "See how we do this, and the lighting goes down here." All this stuff is what these guys gave me. Their own approach to it, and oh God!
And you were in the enviable position that you worked with both Scott brothers. And I'm wondering if you could kind of compare and contrast their style of direction.
Style of direction was pretty much the same. They both came off the same, background in advertising and graphics artists, and so I'm sure Tony was very influenced by his brother in terms of the master the work they do. They both had that in them. They could master the approach, and so their approach was very much the same. To get the most out of an airplane or get the most out of a monster without seeing them. There's always that less is more with each one of them, and that's the thing I learned with all four of these guys was less is more.
I wanted to ask about your work with Redford as director, because I feel that he, as a director, he is so smart about character and the smallest details. I mean, I feel that watching his movies. Is he that kind of very observant director for you?
He's that observant guy. I first job I ever had, mind you, I was in college at UCLA, and I wanted to do I wanted to learn how to write for an actor, and I thought I'd better do some theater so I knew what that was, because you can't write about something if you really haven't experienced it. It's like the hot, you got to touch it. And I was soon doing a play and to do a little Dollar Andy movie where I met Redford. And I met Sidney Pollack at the same time when he was still an actor on this little film. So that's where I go back, was to Redford and his sensibilities and the quietness of the way he went about his success. We're both somewhat similar in that we absorb a lot of things around us. We look at them. We don't just try to show up in the middle of a shot for a close-up. We see it quite differently. And he in his filmmaking, I started going back to Ordinary People. He's very aware of the people. Yeah, as you say, he's very aware of the characters, and he really has a grasp of it. And that's another one of those inexplicable things that we carry with us and show only when we do the work.
Yeah, you are so blessed to have come up at the time when you did. I mean, you work with such extraordinary people, and extraordinary work came out of those experiences that last forever. And that leads to my last question. Is there a film of yours that you feel is under the radar that deserves more attention?
Oh, God, I've never been asked that. I don't really know. God, I'd have to think about that. I know there's a couple that I underestimated myself, which was Turning Point, which is the between Alien and MASH, which turned out to be very successful, and a couple of nominations, that kind of thing.
That was Herbert Ross, wasn't it?
That was Herb Ross, and I worked with him again on Steel Magnolias.
Yeah.
And both of these, I thought, well, God, I love these kind of films, but will they do okay in the marketplace? Always that evaluation. You can't help but feel that way, and to some extent. And yes, they did. So I think I can't really say that they were underrated, though. I just don't know. Offhand, I can't answer that question.
Well, that's okay. You did a great job otherwise.
I mean, I just feel like, I'm just one lucky guy.